Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Friday, October the 7th. And welcome to our commentary. A little heads up, we're going to be doing an interview on Friday night on the podcast, meaning the audio side of the blog. And we're going to be talking to Barry Castleman. Now, we have spoken to Barry many times in the past. In fact, I've been interviewing Barry for the last 10 years. And Barry Castleman, the Prairie editor, that's the name of his website, has been analyzing elections going back to Richard Nixon. In fact, the very first year that he wrote columns about elections was 1968. So that was the first time that Richard Nixon was elected when he defeated Hubert Humphrey in the 1968 election. So Barry has been writing a great deal. By the way, there's an interesting connection to Barry Castleman and President Biden. Back in the 1980s, Barry Castleman wrote several articles about Joe Biden, who at the time was a senator from Delaware. And one of those articles that he wrote predicted that Joe Biden would be someday elected president. Now, as Barry himself will tell you, that was a different Joe Biden that he was writing about. I mean, he was more of a centrist candidate back then. He was a totally different senator than what he's turned into a president, where he's been very much of a left-wing president. But anyway, so Barry has a very interesting perspective on the Biden presidency, and he follows the U.S. Senate elections very closely. And that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to get into, or Friday night, we're going to get into the U.S. Senate elections, and we're going to go through them. We're going to go through them to see who's up and who's down. There are some very deeply contested elections right now. You have one in Arizona, Nevada, in Georgia, in Pennsylvania. These are four contested elections that could determine who wins the Senate and who holds the Senate. And then there are some long shots, and that's what they are, in Colorado and in the state of Washington, where even though the Democrats are favored, both Democrat incumbents are under 50% in all of the different pollings, all the different polls that they've taken out there. So we'll get into all of this with Barry. I'd simply suggest that you check the blog. We're going to be doing it late Friday night, so it should be available late Friday night, but definitely I'll have it there for the entire weekend so you can hear almost like a state-by-state analysis. It's so interesting. If you've never heard Barry Castleman analyze a U.S. Senate election, you will enjoy it a great deal because he knows this stuff, he studies this stuff, and he knows these elections inside out. So check out our conversation with Barry Castleman, the Prairie editor. It'll be recorded Friday night on the blog, that is on the audio. It'll be recorded Friday night, and it'll be there the entire weekend for you to listen to it, and you'll enjoy it. If you like politics, you're going to enjoy it a great deal. Well, this is a very important week because two things happened this week that will have a profound effect on the country and the upcoming midterms. The first thing that happened is OPEC deciding to cut production. The impact of that is going to be devastating on the American economy. Now, we could very easily check it by simply increasing American production. I mean, we could simply say to the drillers in Texas and wherever, hey, just give us oil and we can counteract what OPEC has done. But that doesn't come on right away. That takes a little time. And this administration is not inclined to do that. So the impact of taking 2 million barrels off the market is going to be devastating on the price of gasoline. I don't know what the price will get to, but to say $4 is not inconceivable. $4.50 is not inconceivable. So that's something that you need to keep an eye on, because I think that may have been the October surprise. Everybody's always talking about an October surprise. Well, this was an October surprise, but I'm not sure that this is the one that the White House wanted, but this is the one they're going to get. And again, by the time people are voting in November, by the time you start getting your heating bills in December and January, you're going to notice the impact of OPEC's decision to cut back 2 million barrels of oil every single day. It's absolutely devastating. Now, if we were energy independent, as we were a few years ago, if we were actually exporting energy, as we were a couple of years ago, this wouldn't matter. Well, they wouldn't do it because they wouldn't do it because it wouldn't mean anything, because they would have no influence on us. But we made some big mistakes. The Biden administration made some big mistakes when it comes to energy, and we're paying the price right now. Literally paying the price for that right now. Every time you put gasoline in your car, I hate to tell you because I have to buy it too. I'm not immune from it, but it's going to go up significantly here over the next couple of months. The other big story of the last week is that the GOP is gaining when it comes to the election. I think it's fair to say that if the election was held today, that the GOP would pick up from 15 to 30 seats in the House. I think that's fair to say. That would be where most of the predictions are, 15 to 30. Now, 30, it could be better than 30, but 30 means that there's a big turnout. That's what 30 means, because most of these seats are not competitive. That's one of the problems with the House, is that most of the seats are not really competitive because of the way they're drawn up. I mean, look at Texas. Most of the seats in Texas, the incumbent is going to win regardless of party. So, you're not going to have much turnover in the Texas delegation. You may have one pickup because of a new seat in South Texas that the Republicans are very likely to pick up. But most of the other seats, the incumbent Democrat or incumbent Republican are going to win. So the days of picking up 50, 60 seats in the House, like used to happen in some elections in the past, that's very unlikely, simply because there aren't that many competitive seats. But anywhere between 15 and 30, I think, is very much doable. And that's where the GOP is going to be when it's all said and done. The U.S. Senate is a little different because it's a state-by-state election, and not every state has an election. So, sometimes you can get lucky in who's up for election or what state is up for re-election. Right now, according to RCP is Real Clear Politics, and they do an average of all the polls, and they tell you what the polling average is in the last 7 days or so. And according to them right now, they project that the GOP will finish 52-48. That's what they project, meaning the GOP will hold on to Pennsylvania and pick up Nevada. And here's an interesting one, Arizona. They had a debate last night in Arizona between Blake Masters and Senator Kelly. And I saw some of the clips, and I'm telling you, Senator Kelly did not look very good. His answers were silly. He said, for example, he was critical of the Biden administration cutting back production, but then on the other hand, he voted with the Biden administration to cut back production. He was critical of the Biden administration on the border, but hasn't done a darn thing about it. So he didn't look real good in that debate. And I think that may be one of those that flips also from Senator Kelly to Blake Masters. But anyway, according to GOP, according to RCP, I'm getting my initials confused. According to RCP, the GOP is going to end up 52-48. But there again, there is a turnout factor has to be looked into. The higher the turnout, the more likely that you will have these massive changes in the Senate. For example, Newt Gingrich predicted the other day that the GOP could pick up anywhere from 2 to 7 seats. Well, that's a big prediction. But of course, it's all based on turnout. And he said that. And what he's looking at, what Newt Gingrich is looking at, is such a heavy turnout in some of these elections that pushes over the GOP candidate. Is that going to happen? We'll find out on I guess on election day, or especially the next day. But whenever you have these wave elections where lots and lots of people vote, or one party really goes out to vote, as happened in 2010 for the GOP, as happened in 2018 for the Democrats, when you have these wave elections, then all bets are off, because there will be candidates who lose their seats simply because of the turnout. When you have a wave election, when you have massive voting on one side or the other, what happens is that any incumbent, let's say winning by 2 or 3 points, is very likely going to lose. And that happens when you have a wave election. If we have a wave election this year, then I think you'll see the GOP pickup in the Senate be more to the 3 or 4 or 5, as Newt Gingrich was predicting. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see. All I can tell you is that there is a pollster by the name of Trafalgar. Now, he has been pretty good in predictions in the past, and he's been pretty good in creating a profile or a sample of votes for his analysis. And he predicts. I saw him last week. He predicts that the Republican turnout is going to exceed expectations, meaning it is going to be mammoth. The Republican turnout is going to be mammoth. Now, if that turns out to be the case, then all bets are off, and you will have surprises like in the state of Washington, perhaps, or in Colorado, or in New Hampshire. Those are the kinds of surprises that you could have if there is a wave election. So we'll wait and see what happened, and listen to our conversation with Barry Castleman tonight, because we're going to get into a lot of that stuff on Friday night. And you can listen to the conversation over the weekend, because I'll post it for the weekend. On this day in 1960, we'll leave you with this little story. On this day in 1960, then Senator Kennedy and then Vice President Nixon had one of their debates. They had 3 presidential debates that year. They were actually very good debates. Sometimes I wish more young people would see those debates, because they were really good debates. They were very thoughtful, and both candidates actually spoke well and addressed the issues correctly. But on this debate in 1960, the one that happened on this day in 1960, they got into foreign policy, and Cuba was one of the topics. And what's interesting is that Senator Kennedy really beat up the Eisenhower administration on their treatment of Cuba and how they had allowed a potentially communist regime to flourish in Cuba. And ironically, 6 months after he was elected, or less than 6 months after he was elected, then came the Bay of Pigs. And within a year, Castro had consolidated himself as a communist dictator. Interesting to listen to that debate and find out exactly what happened, because you wouldn't have believed it the night of the debate that a year later, Cuba would be consolidated as a communist country. One thing about that debate, too, that is really fascinating is Vietnam was not mentioned. Vietnam, the issue that would tear up the country in the 1960s, was not mentioned in that debate. Isn't that amazing? Vietnam was not mentioned in that they spoke about Cuba, they spoke about China, they spoke about a lot of things. They didn't speak about Vietnam. It was not mentioned. It was not an issue. Nobody brought it up. Isn't that amazing? The issue that tore up the country in the 1960s did not come up in the first debate of the 1960s. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to check out the interview with Barry Castleman. I think you're going to enjoy it a great deal. Thank you very much, and have a great weekend. We'll talk to you later.